It's become a major part of the way that we're functioning, largely in our communication.
So thank you both so much for joining the Mitten Money podcast this morning, this afternoon. I couldn't be happier than to have two esteemed guests from Capital Group. And so before we go ahead, get into the nitty gritty with all things artificial intelligence, Winston, Wassan, do you mind just giving a brief background about what you guys do at Capital Group?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a practice management consultant, which basically means I'm a business coach, and I coach some of the top financial advisors in the country, helping them overcome obstacles in their own business and how they relate to their own clients. I've been in the industry for 21 years, which I cannot believe. And I've worn a variety of hats. So I used to be a financial advisor, I was a portfolio manager. I worked at a hedge fund prior to coming to Capital Group, where I've spent the bulk of my career coaching advisors. So that's where I sit. Winston.
Yeah, thanks, Wesson. My name is Winston. I'm a senior writer at Capital Group. I work on the marketing team, and I produce content related to advisor practice management. So all things that advisors need and ask for related to practice management, supporting Weston with content from client acquisition to succession planning, everything in between. My background's in PR and marketing as a consultant, just like Weston. So working with, in the past, RIAs, other asset managers, various financial services firms, also on the private markets side, private equity and venture capital firms on their PR and marketing strategies. And super excited to be here. Thanks for having us, William.
Of course, I couldn't be more than happy to be, not only joined by two esteemed guests such as yourself, but just about such a relevant topic today too. Because I think when people started first hearing about artificial intelligence, they may have thought, hey, you know what, this was just born simply in 2022, 2023, but it's been around for a long time. But I guess just trying to go play level stakes here, the first question I really would like to go ask either one of you is, why is it so important? Why has it been such on the top of minds, whether it's seeing people post about it on Facebook, seeing about it in the news cycle, why is it so, and how has it been so important for us as a consumer, or just in relation to the economy, the stock market, all things considered?
Yeah, I mean, and Winston, chime in here. But the thing is some people might think that they're not using AI, but in reality, they really are. It's showing up in forms that we are used to. So what I mean by that is, you and I, let's say we have a question. What's our first thought now is to research it online. We go on Google, we type in that question, and the search that comes back up is no longer a search of links. It's no longer a list of links. There's usually some sort of summary at the top, and that's AI. Or if I go to write you an email, William, I pop up my Outlook, I type in a new message. As I'm typing, it starts suggesting ways for me to finish my sentence. That's AI. A bunch of us have Instagram or Facebook, and as we're typing messages and messaging our friends, it's suggesting ways that we can make that more streamlined. That's AI. So the reality is it's popping up in such a variety of ways that we've become used to, in a lot of different platforms that we've gotten used to, and it's really kind of happening, not just in the last couple of years, but like you're saying, it's become a major part of the way that we're functioning, largely in our communication. I don't know, Winston, if you have anything to add to that.
No, that's perfectly put, Wesson. Yeah, when people ask like, why should I care about AI, or how can I use AI? It's like, because you already do. You already do use it. You already do care about it. If you've got an Apple, if you've got an iPhone, if you use Google search, if you use an email client like Gmail or Outlook, you already use it. And I think, as with any new tech, you think about the Gartner hype cycle, right? You're going to get a lot of headlines, headline risk, negative headlines, positive headlines. So I think people are trying to figure out, where are we with all of this and where is it going? A human impact story here, right? Just like Weston was talking about. You think about jobs, you think about security, privacy. One of those techs that like comes to you where you live and where you work. So you have to I think I'm sympathetic to those, major concerns, those kind of big skepticisms that are out there about AI. And then there's the broader economic impact, right? You think about like how much of the stock market, we talked about the Magnificent Seven for so long, right? Like how much of the stock market is concentrated in few companies, how much their market cap has increased because of, the AI hype. And so, these concerns that is it becoming disassociated from the fundamentals? Like how much of this is overblown? Are we major correction, even bigger than the one that we saw last week? So along with, tariffs and trade, I think the AI, economic impact and human impact are really driving a lot of these concerns. And people are thinking, how can AI unlock that we never thought possible, curing diseases, improving ways of working, raising the floor, economically for people, giving us access to ways of analyzing information that we'd never had before, and how could that help people?
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. And you both bring up a lot of really good points. And so, I mean, from my perspective, facetiously, I've always been bad with trying to go type up a nice, consistent message. And, it can take me, 15 to 20 minutes to go think about how I can go layer a specific email or if I want to go communicate a certain tone. And so for myself, having those tools, like just thinking about facetiously, whether it's ChatGPT or Claude, be able to go help formulate an email, of course, would be easier for me. But I also understand that it's very polarizing for people. And so outside of those, simple use case, why do you think people are so scared, or why do you think there is that kind of like it factor behind it?
Yeah, I think, just to build off of what Winston was saying earlier, that human impact, we all have the images of iRobot or Terminator in our brain. And those are things that we kind of grew up with, that sort of societal fear that technology is going to take over everything. And I think that's kind of a real thing, right? When you think about just the human experience, it's always been, am I going to be replaced? Is something going to happen where technology kind of takes over the day-to-day human experience? We all see those memes of, I saw one the other day, and it was one of the fast food restaurants, and one that we grew up going to that had a play area. And then fast forward to today, and the play area is simply two screens on a wall with two very lonely looking chairs that are facing the screen away from the rest of the restaurant. And I think that's kind of a signal of the nostalgia factor of human interaction and, human experience, and what technology can do to kind of wither away at that. And I think that's part of the polarizing nature of what AI could potentially do, and why it's so, kind of sparks a lot of fear in the normal person. The other part of it, and I think this is something that we can probably tap into a little bit later on, but just thinking about, Winston and I were talking about this. You've got this high schooler who's got a book report coming due. They go on and they just ask AI to create the book report for them. And, there go the scientific research, there goes the out the window is the time and effort that it takes to actually understand and develop your own hypothesis about a specific subject. So the citation aspect of it, kind of the critical thinking aspect of it, I think also becomes polarizing. But I don't know, Winston, please chime in here, because I know you've got some thoughts as well.
Yeah, skills development is so important, Weston. I think, you see firms in every industry saying, "Hey, we're not going to hire junior staff, or we're going to cut down on our junior staff because AI can do the work that the staff level associates do." Well, so then who are the enterprise leaders in 10 years? In your world, William, right? Like there was something going around on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago about AI note takers. That those have risen in popularity among financial professionals. You can have this AI kind of take all the meeting notes, produce the action items, send a follow-up email to the client. It works great. That's typically something you delegate to, an associate advisor, a paraplanner, some staffer, and it's important for their development, especially if they're, coming up in the ranks. So then do you kind of give up something there? Like, sure, you become more efficient, you need fewer people on the call, but like, do you give up something there? So skills development, and then of course taken to the extreme, like human replacement, skill replacement. AI is going to take our jobs, altogether. There's this headline earlier this week. Morgan Stanley plans to lay off, I think it was 2,000 workers. And then the headline noted replacing some with AI, of course. Weston and I are here in LA. We remember the guild strikes. It's been big in Hollywood for a while now. Like, we don't want AI writing anything that goes on TV. So there's definitely the job impact. And then there's the question of like, can I trust AI? Is AI trustworthy? So you hear about hallucinations, AI just making stuff up. And if people overly rely on it, don't have fact checking, don't, edit the work, you could see how that leads people to some pretty bad places. There's also is the way that AI developed trustworthy kind of question. So we've all read about the lawsuits brought against these kind of big companies because allegedly they're taking IP without asking, like they're cutting corners, training their models on data that is not rightfully theirs. And then there's also the like going back to human impact. Do Even if AI is good, or in the hands of people who are bad actors, right? And this was the same thing with crypto. It's the same thing with every tech cycle. But I mean, in your neck of the woods, William, I think it was last year in Grand Rapids, there was this story about how an AI scam nearly cheated AI voice cloning. Like it pretended to be her daughter, and made the call, and then she almost, gave away the 50K. So it hits close to home for a lot of people. And like, if you're not savvy with it, then the gap between the cyber criminal and the average civilian is just going to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
I appreciate you both mentioning some of those points. And so suffusely, some students may be using it to better help their book reports, possibly not having as much critical thinking skills being developed. And so what are some other AI tools that might be out there? Weston, you mentioned the scam portion, but I think there's probably a lot more that's already out there that people may not realize. And so something that I like to go joke around with when I'm talking with people about AI and algorithms specifically is that, hey, Netflix uses an algorithm and it's usually pretty accurate based off the stuff you watch. They can produce pretty good recommendations. And so would either of you two, have you seen any other interesting use cases for AI tools or algorithms like that?
Yeah, so I think the obviously we've already talked about the most common one is basically your phone. So, whether it's your iPhone or you have a Google Chrome, Google is obviously one of the largest, most consumer friendly forms of using AI in your day to day. So, that's kind of one thing that I just wanted to mention again, because it is such an important part of the consciousness around, what's most widely used by consumers. One of the other things that we kind of were thinking about was in kind of thinking about this question is there are some tools out there that I actually didn't know about. So I am going to put Winston on the spot here. So for instance, he talked about Perplexity, which is a search engine similar to Google, but it actually has citations. So Winston, I do want to put you on the spot because I do think this is really interesting and kind of hits the mark with all the other stuff that we were talking about.
Yeah, thanks, Weston. So, yeah, William, I think it's helpful to kind of have categories of like what AI tools are. So Weston and I have talked a lot about integrations into your existing tools. So as you're just using your email, as you're just using your phone, it's already built in. Those are kind of the legacy tech companies that are adding more and more features to their existing base. But then there's the competitors, there's the disruptors, right? And Perplexity is one such disruptor. Toward the end of last year, raised another round. They're VC backed, I think at a $9 billion valuation. They've only been around for a few years, and they're AI native in that they came around, as Gen AI developed and applied that to search and said, hey, people don't want a list of links, people want summaries. But we also want to, make sure that we're like applying the scientific method. That's kind of the founding team's background to our search methodology. So let's make sure we have like good citations. We can show people our work and they can check it out for themselves. So we're going to have the best of both worlds, right? You're not going to have to parse through a whole page of links. You're going to get the answer right away, but you can do your due diligence. Now, how much do people actually check out the citations versus, taking things for at face value and just moving on, to be determined. But so that's kind of the big application that people are familiar with, and if I had to identify one thing that's the most popular, it's that chatbot AI or conversational AI. So that's the application. So like ChatGPT, Claude, you mentioned William earlier, right? There's so many. Gemini, DeepSeek, which made a big splash a couple months ago. A lot of headlines about that. So all Grok. There are all kinds of tools out there that are essentially an upgraded way to have a conversation with a machine. In the past couple of months, we've seen a lot more reasoning and agentic AI tools come onto the scene, and so people who are uh, staying at the cutting edge of AI have seen a step function increase in like the capabilities of these tools to do really impressive things. So like for instance, for business owners, prospecting, like you could delegate to an AI agent, have it find your ideal customers, scrape their websites for contact information, write the email, like search on Yelp for a coffee shop, that's nearby that prospects headquarters, suggest that, look at your calendar and suggest it does a few times, and personalize the email, and then you edit it and hit send. It can do all of that for you in the background as you're like watching Netflix, and so people are kind of pioneering these more transformative uses of AI. But I think that's, as with anything else, I think people kind of just wait for the like off the shelf, out the box solution to come to them. So outside of conversational AI, I think mainstream, it's hard to identify any particular applications that like have really emerged. A lot of those are industry specific. So financial professionals, like there's a lot of AI native, custom built for advisors. We talked about AI note taking. There's, tax planning, modeling, companies out there a tax return to, and then it'll extract the important data, give you some recommendations. Industry, yeah, mainstream, it's largely conversational AI, and then more recently some reasoners and AI agents that people are experimenting with.
Winston, something that I want to double click on before we go ahead and move on to our signature closing Mitten Money question this season is in relation to the things that fall outside of the traditional box. Because when people think of artificial intelligence algorithms, they think, okay, this is just stuff that fits in this regular old tech box, when there's so many more use cases, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in fast food. And so do you mind touching upon some of those other use cases that might not be as prevalent or as common?
Yeah. One that I heard about recently, so ChatGPT, OpenAI kind of added a feature where you can queue up to-dos or like tasks, so schedule future tasks. Um, People were talking about how like if you're learning a second language, right? So, hey, I want you to send me 10 sentences in Spanish that I'm gonna have to translate to English. And I want you to do it at, 6 p.m. every evening, and I want them to get progressively more difficult, as the month goes on or whatever, right? So start with simple sentence structure. Next week, do a little more complex. Increase the vocabulary, like the complexity of the vocabulary, etc. So, like, who would have thought, right? I mean, yeah. So I think my point there is it's at a consumer level, at like a everyday, just you and me, like how do we use it level. It's kind of as like just dream as much as you can dream that, like, go try it. And that's where I think the that's where the limiting factor is right now for those users, is like if you're sitting down with these tools, if you have a basic grasp on prompt engineering, and how to talk to these tools, then it's just like experimentation, and you see a lot of people kind of building in public with those use cases. In terms of like ready-made applications that are super surprising and like vetted and have been tried and tested and true, I think we're still in a lot of industries like uh, waiting to get to that. Like there's a lot of work being done in building out those kind of custom built applications. But largely that's those are venture backed startups. Who knows what that landscape is going to look like? You know, if we had this call 3 months from now, like a lot of these companies that we're thinking about or naming, you know, might not even exist, might have, you know, been acquired, you know, outcompeted, whatever. So the landscape is always shifting there. I think we're kind of still waiting for that shakeout.
And I think, you know, if I could add, we were talking about this earlier, which is, you know, the key here is not to get enamored by the technology, but instead to get enamored with how it can solve problems for you and your clients or your customers. So, you know, in thinking about the folks that you're working with, William, you know, you're working probably with a lot of business owners, people who are running, you know, pretty complex businesses or their partners in law firms, et cetera. And one of the ways to kind of think about the use case of this or how to apply it to your everyday is to have some sort of strategy or some sort of action plan, right? So if you think about how do I where do I spend the majority of my time? That's like step number one. And Winston always says it's high impact, high frequency. So the areas that a lot of your time and budget are going towards, that's something that you should start to identify. Where is my time going? Where's my budget going? Where are my people spending the majority of their time? And is it a pain point for my day to day? And then the second step is really thinking about tools. You know, is AI going to be the solution or is it something else? Do I have to hire a new person? So really kind of analyzing like where the solution is coming from. Is it going to come from technology? Am I going to be giving something up if I do go the technology way? Or does it have to come from a different thing? Like, do I have to increase my budget for marketing? Or do I have to, you know, hire somebody new to do that one task? And then from there, you can start to think about which applications to use if it is technology. So if it is AI, you know, start to think about, okay, you know, what is it that I want it to solve for me and start putting that into place. And then refine, you know, because like Winston's talking about, things are ever evolving. We're you know, it's kind of nascent, but the evolution of this has happened so robustly and so quickly when you really think about the advancements in this technology. And regulations haven't caught up yet. So that's another component of this. So entering into long-term contracts for any of your business owners or anybody that's considering this technology, don't do it. There's no need to. Go on a monthly plan, you know, look at a variety of different tools, look at a variety of different technologies, do a side-by-side comparison as you're testing them out. Don't sign any long-term contracts because that technology might be regulated out. It might not exist. It might be gobbled up by a different company in the long run. So take your time, be thorough, come up with a strategy plan, and just ask yourself, where am I spending my time? Is it a pain point? Does it need to be solved with technology or potentially a human factor? And then what's my next steps? And again, short term, bite size is probably the best approach here.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I certainly appreciate both of you diving into that a little bit further. I know when you get sometimes outside the more use cases, sometimes people are like, "Hey, what? You know what all can it really do out there?" So I think you answered probably a few questions for the audience listeners out there. And so now breaking off to a little bit less on the AI front, a little more on the streaming and watching front. And so I would love to get both of your takes on what you've been watching or streaming lately. It's something that Kevin and myself love asking each other, love keeping on top of that. And so would love to go see what's on both of your minds from a streaming or from a TV perspective.
Winston, why don't you go for? I have a feeling you're
Yeah.
going to be much more interesting than me.
So, well, William, I'm smiling because it's also an AI answer. So a few days ago, I'm trying to convince my wife of like the power of reasoning AI tools. And I'm using like Deep Research, OpenAI's or Claude 3.7 Sonnet, you know, like there's a few reasoners out there, R1 from DeepSeek. And I'm like, look how powerful these things are. So to kind of demonstrate it, one of the few shows that she and I can both watch Like the Venn diagram of shows that my wife and I enjoy is like it has a pretty small intersection in the middle. The Great British Baking Show is in that intersection in the middle of that Venn diagram. So I'm like, let me just show you a report on every contestant who's ever gone on the Great British Baking Show, what they were doing, when they came on the show, what their occupation was, how they finished, and then like if their life was changed at all by the show, if they switched or whatever. I'm going to show you a report, and I'm going to do it in like 10 minutes. So I entered the prompt into deep research. I asked it to work, and then it came out with it. Properly cited, comprehensive, every season of the Great British Baking Show, every contestant who's ever been on it, and everything you'd want to know, at least that's publicly available about those contestants and the bakeries that they've opened and the job changes that they've they've had. So, Great British Baking Show is the answer to that question. But yeah, you can use AI for anything.
Certainly, no. It sounds like a pretty cool use of it.
I know, that's awesome. For me, we have been watching Succession, and my husband and I kind of came late to the game, so we've been binge watching all the seasons. So now we're on season 3. Fantastic. I love the show. I'm sure a lot of people watch it, but I think I'll answer your question a little bit differently as well. A few months ago, my uncle and my aunt and my cousins were visiting, and they live all over the country. So we were talking, and my cousin, she's 16 years old. She's a lot younger than me. She said how into movies she is. So we decided to create a film club. So we have a film club in my family. It spans the whole country. We're constantly texting one another. Every 2 weeks, one of us takes a turn choosing a different movie. And I've gotten to watch some movies that I normally would not have picked on my own. And There Will Be Blood was one of them, and that's probably not. And then The Pale Blue Eye. If you have not seen The Pale Blue Eye, highly recommend it. I thought that was a great one. Not in my wheelhouse typically, but that was a really good one. And the most recent one that we saw was Saving Mr. Banks, which is always a really good, feel-good movie. But also had not seen it. So Pale Blue Eye and Succession. Those are my 2 answers.
No, certainly some good titles. And, it's interesting you bring up Succession. I was really early on in the show, but I stopped watching 2 or 3 episodes in. And I was thinking about, there's a little bit of a lull between, stuff that I want to watch versus stuff that's going to be released in the future. So I actually picked it back up, and I don't know why I ever dropped off. It's such a good show, such a good cast of characters. And so I certainly appreciate you both answering that. It's very interesting to go see what people watch, and certainly some good suggestions, especially for all the listeners out there. And so, Winston and Wassan, I really do appreciate both of you to be able to go come on, talk a little more about AI and technology, and it's been a fun conversation this afternoon. So thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us, Will. Appreciate it.